So this is going to be a center start on a piece. It's good for round shawls. For us, it's for the iris hat, starting from the top of the crown and working out. And this is something that crocheters use all the time. I've watched several videos on it. There is, I think one of the early ones is Emily Ockley's center out cast on, which is you do a lot with Elizabeth Zimmerman patterns. It wasn't my favorite because it actually starts with crochet stitches that are then put onto knit needles. There is another version that you can actually start with a crocheted magic loop, and then again you transfer those stitches onto your knitting needles. But the one I did find that I did like is you actually start as a knit cast on. So I'm going to take this out now and I will show you how that works. So you're going to start with your yarn held like this. You're going to make yourself a circle, and you want to be sure that your working yarn is going over the top of your tail. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. I know that one of the recommended tutorials for this hat had the whole tail hanging off to the right. For me, that was a little too fiddly to try and hold the tail together while I was then casting on with my left hand. So this is what worked best for me, and I recommend everyone do what works best for you. So you have this circle. You want your tail fairly long because we have to cast on 24 stitches. You want your working yarn going over the top. I know most of the videos will start with you reaching through and bringing this up. I did not start mine that way because it ends up with a yarn over as your last stitch, which is very hard for me to start knitting with. So I start by putting my right hand needle right underneath my working yarn, which creates a yarn over. I just kind of secure it there. Then what you're going to do is the trick is to work over both of these pieces of yarn. So I'm going to go underneath both of those. I'm going to go around my yarn and bring it through the center. That gives me 2 stitches. Now I'm going to do essentially a yarn over, take my yarn over the top of the needle, and then again I'm going to come back down through the middle, grab my yarn and bring it up. So the stitches really are put on by 2s. Yarn over, through the middle, grab my yarn. Yarn over, through the middle, grab my yarn. And you just keep doing this until you have all 24 stitches on your needle. And I'm casting them all onto one needle. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. Some of the videos, depending on how they were doing it, it was hard to do it loose. So the nice thing I did learn about this is keeping these stitches loose. You do not have to pull this closed until you're well on your way, which is also kind of handy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around so that I can start knitting. For me, it was easier to use double-pointed needles for this very top. You can do a magic loop version of this. Again, it was a little too much going on at one time. So now we're going to knit these off and do our first row of the iris hat. So now I'm going to go ahead and knit this off. One of the tricks I did learn that was hugely valuable is when you're knitting what looks here like a knit stitch, if you knit it through the back loop, it makes a much better beginning. So the pattern has you purl the first stitch. And since this will be on double pointed needles, which are generally done 3 needles, the 4th needle is my knitting needle. So I've got 24 divided by 3, which is going to give me 8 stitches to a needle, which for this pattern is perfect because you want to divide them up into sets of 4. So I'm going to purl my first stitch, and then I'm going to knit this one, as I said, through the back loop. I'm going to purl the next stitch, and if you look at the pattern directions, it tells you to purl 1, knit 1 2 times, so your 4 stitches. And I don't have any markers here with me, but you would put a stitch marker right here. So now I'm going to do my second set. I'm going to purl 1, knit through the back loop, purl 1, and knit through the back loop. So that's my first 8. Since I'm on double pointed needles, I will not need to put a marker here because the end of the needle is my marker. Simply pick up another double pointed needle. Just let this one drop. You don't have to really move it out of the way. Just go in underneath it, and you're going to purl your first stitch. And again, we're going to knit through the back loop. Purl. Knit through the back loop. Again, if I had my stitch markers here, I would put a marker right there. Purl. Knit through the back loop. Purl, knit through the back loop. And now you're doing your last needle. So again, you just continue on with your new needle. So we're going to do a purl stitch. We're going to knit through the back loop. We're going to purl, knit through the back loop, purl, knit through the back loop, purl, and you're going to end by knitting through the back loop. So now you've got your first row done. This is in the round, so we want to keep going this direction. So you can see all my needles are perfectly lined up. So I want to bring them up and around because we're going to go in the round, which means, and they really do just fall into place if you let them. So you've got your triangle here. I'm going to tuck everything down underneath the bottom. So I've got them all set up, and I'm just going to knit. So this second row is where you do your first increase on this. Hold for a moment.
I don't know. Okay.
Row 2 of the iris hat pattern, we have done our magic loop, so to speak, and cast on our 24 stitches. We've done our very first row and in theory placed our markers, but I don't have any markers, so you will not see markers in mine. And now what we want to do is we want to continue on, and we want to be working in the round. So the first stitch, take our last needle, this is our knitting needle now, and you want to purl that first stitch, and you just want to do this tightly to bring these stitches together. So purl that one and just make sure the two needles kind of butt up against each other. And no longer knitting through the back loops. Now you're just purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one. On this pattern, after those first 4 stitches of every section, you will be doing an increase. You will be increasing a knit and a purl. So the first row, you're going to put that increased knit stitch. The next time around, you'll increase here and put a purl stitch. So they should all be left leaning. So I'm going to pick up this piece of yarn, the ladder. You want to be very careful that you've picked up the piece that actually goes from this stitch over to this stitch, one long piece. You want to place it onto your needle with the left hand needle going from the front to the back, and then the short leg. See, it's the nice long leg, easy to get into. Nothing easy here, so we want to go to the back side and knit that stitch. So I've increased one. Again, my marker would be right here. So now I'm on my second set. Purl, knit, purl. And now don't get excited. This looks like, oh my God, now what do I do? Same mechanics. You've got one piece of yarn that runs directly from one stitch to the other right here. That's the piece you want to pick up and do your increase. So you just put your needle in from front to back, and again you're knitting through that short leg which is in the back, knit that stitch. So now you've done 2 sections. So we're going to do that all the way around, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we've gone all the way around, and don't forget to make your very last make one right here. And this is the only time that you will be doing your make ones between the needles. After this, they all happen right after your first 4 stitches of each section. So now this is the really fun part, and if you turn it over, it's really fun to watch it happen. What we're going to do is pull this closed. And because when we did the first cast on, we went over both of those pieces, you've got one tail that is just free running right through all of those live stitches. So if I pull on it, it will just close up. Ha-ha, there you go. And then you can turn it back over and keep on knitting. And the nice thing is, if you want more room, you can you don't have to close this completely until you're further away from it. If it starts to open up, just tug on it. I don't sew mine down until I'm done with the hat. But there you go. You've got a really nice start to the crowning center of your iris hat.